The day everything broke started with a pen. A cheap black pen slid across a polished oak table toward me. Pushed by my own mother, her fingers perfectly manicured, her smile already prepared. "Just sign here," she said. "It's a formality." I remember thinking how strange it was that my name looked unfamiliar on paper that day. Like it belonged to someone else. Like it wasn't fully mine anymore. My name is Hannah Cole. I was 31 years old when I signed that document. I worked as a senior operations manager for a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio. I was unmarried, child-free, and known in my family as the dependable one, the reasonable one, the one who didn't need much. That last part would cost me everything. We were sitting in my parents' dining room in a quiet suburb outside Columbus. The same room where birthdays were celebrated late because my younger sister's schedule always came first. The same room where my opinions were acknowledged with nods but never acted on. Across from me sat my mother, Linda. Beside her, my father, Robert. Silent as always, hands folded, eyes fixed on the paperwork, as if it might speak if he looked away. And then there was my sister, Emily Cole, 28, recently divorced, recently unemployed, recently returned home with more expectations than luggage. The document in front of me was labeled Partnership Adjustment Agreement. "Read it if you want," my mother said lightly, "but it's just about the family business." The family business. Cole Event Supply. It wasn't glamorous. We rented tents, chairs, lighting, stages, weddings, corporate events, fundraisers. It had been built by my grandmother, Ruth Cole, 40 years earlier, with one truck and a stubborn refusal to quit. After she passed, my parents inherited it. I inherited responsibility. For 6 years, I ran operations quietly, streamlined vendors, negotiated contracts, fixed payroll mistakes, covered gaps when employees quit. I didn't own the company, but I kept it alive. Emily, meanwhile, floated in and out. Creative consultant, brand advisor, titles invented to justify paychecks. When her marriage collapsed, she moved back home and took over what my mother called the vision side. That was when the meetings started happening without me. So when my mother asked me to sign something minor, I didn't argue. I never did. "What does this change exactly?" I asked. My mother waved her hand. "It just protects the company while Emily gets back on her feet." I glanced at my sister. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Protects it from what?" I asked. "From instability," my father said quietly. His first word in 20 minutes. I should have stood up then. I should have read every line. I should have asked for a lawyer. Instead, I signed. Because families don't hurt you on purpose. That's what I believed then. 2 weeks later, I lost my job. Not at my company, at the family business. I wasn't fired. That would have been honest. I was restructured out. Emily became director of operations overnight. I became redundant. The email came from my mother. "We've decided to move in a new direction. We're so grateful for everything you've done. This isn't personal." I stared at the screen in my office, surrounded by systems I'd built, schedules I'd maintained, relationships I'd repaired. "This has to be a mistake," I said when I called her. "No," she replied calmly. "It's necessary." "For who?" "For the family." That word again. I drove home in silence, hands tight on the steering wheel, replaying every conversation from the last 6 months. The late meetings I wasn't invited to. The financial reports I stopped receiving. The way my sister suddenly had authority she'd never earned. I opened the document I'd signed. "Actually read it." My hands went cold. The agreement didn't protect the business. It transferred voting control from me to them. I had signed away the only leverage I didn't even realize I had. And as I sat alone in my apartment that night, the realization landed with terrifying clarity. I hadn't been pushed out. I had been set up. The first week after I was pushed out, no one checked on me. Not my parents, not my sister. Not a single employee I'd trained, protected, or covered for over 6 years. At first, I told myself it made sense. People were busy. Transitions were awkward. Everyone assumed I was fine. I had always been fine. I woke up the Monday, no messages. By noon, I drove past the warehouse. The parking lot was full. My old spot was taken. Through the open bay door, I could see movement. Forklifts, pallets, business as usual, as if I'd never existed. I didn't go in. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of watching me ask questions I already knew the answers to. Instead, I went home and did the thing I'd been avoiding. I opened the company's shared drive. My access was still active. That wouldn't last. I downloaded everything. Contracts, vendor agreements, payroll records, inventory logs, emails, calendars, financial projections. Not to steal, to remember. Because when people rewrite your role, documentation is the only thing that doesn't forget. As I scrolled through emails from the past year, patterns emerged. Threads I hadn't been included on. Decisions labeled urgent that conveniently happened when I was out of town. Budget changes approved by my father, implemented by Emily, and quietly supported by my mother. I saw my own suggestions reused weeks later under different names. There was a message from my sister to my mother, dated 3 months earlier. Once Hannah's signs were clear, she won't fight it. She never does. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. That night, my father called. "Hannah," he said, as if nothing had happened. "Your mother's upset." I waited. "She feels like you're pulling away." I almost laughed. "I was removed from my job," I said, without warning. "It wasn't personal," he replied automatically. "When is it ever?" I asked. He sighed. "Emily needs this." There it was. "She needs it more than I do?" I asked. "She's fragile right now," he said. "You're strong." I closed my eyes. Strength. In my family, it wasn't a compliment. It was an excuse. "Did you plan this?" I asked. There was a pause. Too long. "We did what we thought was best," he said finally. "For who?" I asked again. "For everyone." That was when I understood something important. They truly believed this was fair. The next morning, I received an email from the company accountant, Mark. "Hey, Hannah, quick heads up. Emily asked me to remove you from payroll systems and financial oversight. Just following instructions. Hope you're doing okay." Just following instructions. I replied with one sentence. "Thanks for letting me know." Then I forwarded the email to my personal account. The isolation deepened fast. My aunt stopped returning calls. A cousin I'd once helped with a job application unfriended me on social media. At the grocery store, I ran into a longtime client who looked surprised to see me shopping in the middle of the day. "Didn't expect to see you," he said. "I heard you left the company." "I didn't leave," I replied. He hesitated. "Oh. Well, good luck." That was the version of the story spreading. I left. I sat in my apartment that evening, surrounded by quiet, and replayed the past 10 years of my life. Every holiday where I arrived early to help set up. Every emergency call I answered. Every time I stepped back so Emily could step forward. I had thought love was demonstrated by being useful. What I was learning was that usefulness had an expiration date. The turning point came from an unexpected place. My grandmother's old friend, Margaret. She called me out of the blue. "I heard you're not with the company anymore," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm not." There was a pause. "Hannah," she said carefully, "did you sign something recently?" "Yes." Her breath caught. "Oh no," she said softly. "You did exactly what they needed." "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your grandmother warned me this might happen." My chest tightened. "Warned you how?" Margaret exhaled slowly. "She always worried your parents would favor the child who needed the most. She said if Emily ever failed badly enough, they'd sacrifice you to keep the family image intact." The words landed heavy. "She told me," Margaret continued, "that if that day ever came, you should look at the business loans, the original ones." "Why?" I asked. "Because the company isn't as clean as they pretend," she said. After we hung up, I sat very still. The silence around me didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a warning bell. I opened my laptop again. This time, I wasn't just remembering. I was preparing. The first loan was easy to find. It sat buried in a folder labeled Archive, Do Not Use. A relic from the early days of the company, when my grandmother still signed checks by hand. I remembered scanning it years ago and thinking it was irrelevant. Paid off. Closed. History. That was the story, anyway. I opened the PDF and started reading more carefully than I ever had before. The loan had been issued 12 years ago, secured against the warehouse property. Fixed interest, 10-year term. It should have been gone. But it wasn't marked satisfied. No discharge. No lien release. No final confirmation from the bank. I checked the balance history. There were payments. Then gaps. Then a large refinancing 5 years ago. I felt a slow, deliberate tightening in my chest. That refinancing hadn't been approved by the board. I would have known. I handled operations, but any debt restructuring crossed my desk. It was policy. My policy. I pulled up the more recent loan documents, the ones my father had always waved off as routine maintenance of credit. They weren't routine. They were layered. Multiple short-term business loans, cross-collateralized, personal guarantees attached. My parents' names were on some of them. Emily's was on none. I followed the trail the way I'd been trained to follow broken supply chains. Methodically, without emotion. From document to document, lender to lender. By midnight, I had a working theory. The company wasn't struggling. It was bleeding. Not from operations, from decisions. Bad ones, quiet ones. Ones made without oversight. I slept for 3 hours and woke up with a headache that felt like pressure rather than pain. The next morning, I called the bank, not as myself. I called as a former operations manager, requesting clarification on legacy accounts for tax documentation. Calm voice, precise language, no accusations. The woman on the line hesitated when I mentioned the older loan number. That account is active, she said. Active, I repeated. It should have been closed years ago. There was typing. It was modified, she said. Converted into a balloon structure. My grip tightened on the phone. When? I asked. 5 years ago. That was the year my father took an early retirement from his consulting work. The year my parents remodeled their kitchen. The year Emily quit her job to find herself. The pieces slid together with sickening clarity. I thanked the woman and hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I sat very still and let the picture finish forming. They hadn't pushed me out because Emily needed a job. They pushed me out because they needed someone who wouldn't ask questions. And Emily never asked questions. That afternoon, I drove to the warehouse, not to confront anyone, to observe. The receptionist looked startled when she saw me. "Oh, hi, Hannah," she said. "I didn't know you were coming by." "I'm just picking up some personal items," I replied. She nodded too quickly and buzzed me through. Inside, things felt off. Stacks of inventory were miscategorized. Equipment rentals logged incorrectly. A vendor arguing quietly with Emily near the loading dock. I stayed invisible. In my old office, my nameplate was gone. Emily had already moved in. Her desk was cluttered. Papers everywhere. Sticky notes like a frantic attempt at control. On her screen was an email chain. She hadn't locked her computer. I shouldn't have looked. I did. The subject line made my stomach drop. Loan extension request. Urgent. The sender was my father. The recipient was the same bank. The message was brief. "We are undergoing a temporary leadership transition. Please work directly with Emily Cole going forward. She is authorized to handle all operational matters." Authorized, but not informed. Emily wasn't in control. She was a shield. I took photos of the screen with my phone. Then I gathered my things and left without speaking to anyone. That evening, my mother called. "You were at the warehouse today," she said. "Yes," I replied. "You shouldn't be going there," she said. "It confuses people." "I used to work there," I said calmly. "People are already confused." She didn't respond. "Hannah," she said finally, "we're under a lot of stress right now." "I know," I said. "I've seen the loans." The silence on the line was no longer calculated. It was afraid. "We did what we had to," she said. "No," I replied. "You did what you wanted. And now you're out of time." She started to speak. I ended the call. That night, I contacted a lawyer. Not a family friend. Not someone my parents knew. A woman named Claire Donnelly, mid-40s, specialized in corporate governance and fiduciary disputes. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said one sentence. "They removed you because you're the only one who could stop this." I stared at the wall in front of me. "What happens now?" I asked. She paused. "Now," she said, "you decide whether you want justice quietly or whether you want everything to collapse under the weight of the truth." I looked at the photos on my phone, the emails, the unsigned loan releases, the document I'd signed without reading. For the first time since this began, I felt something solid beneath my feet. They thought they'd stripped me of power. What they'd actually done was remove my obligation to protect them. The story about me changed before I said a word. I noticed it in small ways at first. A pause when my name came up. A shift in tone when people asked what I was doing now. The kind of politeness that isn't kindness, just distance wearing good manners. My mother was efficient. By the end of the week, the narrative was in place. I was burned out. I was overwhelmed. I had lost perspective after being passed over for leadership. None of it was dramatic. That was the point. Dramatic would have invited questions. This version sounded reasonable. Emily played her part well. She posted photos from the warehouse, smiling, sleeves rolled up, captions about stepping up when family needs you. Comments poured in, praising her strength. No one asked where I went. On Sunday, my Aunt Carol stopped by my apartment unannounced. She brought a pie and a look of concern carefully arranged on her face. "Hannah," she said, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. "We're all worried about you." "I'm fine," I said. She held me at arm's length. "Your mother says you're not handling the transition well." I waited. "She said you're fixated on numbers, on money, that you think everyone's out to get you." I nodded slowly. "That must be hard to hear," Carol added. "It is," I said, "because it's not true." She patted my arm. "You've always been intense." That word again. Another soft weapon. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wall until the quiet settled into something usable. I didn't correct the story. Correction would have sounded defensive. Instead, I met with Claire Donnelly the next morning. Her office was spare. No family photos, no motivational quotes, just law books and clean lines. She spread the documents I'd gathered across the table. "You were removed as a control mechanism," she said plainly. "That's textbook." "What are my options?" I asked. She leaned back. "We move slowly. You don't confront. You don't threaten. You let them continue exactly as they are." "Why?" I asked. "Because they're already unstable," she replied. "And instability leaves records." She slid a document toward me. "This is a notice of potential fiduciary breach," she said. "We don't file it yet. We prepare it." I read the first paragraph. My name appeared in a way it hadn't in weeks. Not as a problem, as a party with standing. "Your parents think they removed you," Claire continued. "Legally, they created exposure. You were the only thing buffering their decisions." I signed the engagement letter without hesitation. That afternoon, I received an email from my mother. Subject: family dinner tonight. No apology, no acknowledgement, just expectation. I went, not to reconcile, to observe. Dinner was tense but polite. My father talked about supply delays. Emily complained about staffing issues. My mother watched me carefully, as if gauging how much damage I might do by simply being present. At one point, Emily said, "You know, running things is harder than it looks." I met her eyes. "I know." She flushed and looked away. After dessert, my mother followed me into the kitchen. "You need to stop digging," she said quietly. "I'm not digging," I replied. "I'm reading." "You're going to hurt this family," she said. I looked at her then. Really looked. "You already did," I said. "You just didn't expect consequences." Her mouth tightened. "We gave you everything," she said. "No," I replied. "You took everything that made you uncomfortable." She stepped back as if struck. The next day, Claire forwarded me something. An internal email chain. Anonymous. From a vendor I'd worked with for years. "Your sister asked me to backdate an invoice. I refused. Thought you should know." That was the moment the shift became irreversible. I didn't respond to the vendor. I forwarded it to Claire. She replied with 2 words. "Good. Keep going." By the end of the week, 3 more messages arrived. Small irregularities, quiet concerns. People who trusted me more than the story being told about me. I logged everything. I said nothing. Meanwhile, the family version of events escalated. My mother told people I was considering time away, that I might move, that I was struggling. Emily told a supplier I'd lost confidence in my abilities. They weren't just removing me. They were erasing credibility. Claire warned me this would happen. "They'll try to make you look unreliable," she said, "because unreliable people aren't believed." I didn't argue. I prepared. On Friday afternoon, I signed a document, not a lawsuit, a request, a formal demand for financial disclosures under state corporate law. Based on my previous role and the restructuring agreement I'd been misled into signing. Claire filed it quietly. No drama, no announcement, just paperwork. My father called within 2 hours. "What did you do?" he asked. "I asked for transparency," I replied. His voice dropped. "You're going to regret this." "I already regretted staying quiet," I said. "This is easier." He hung up. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by folders and files, and felt the strangest sense of calm I'd had in weeks. They thought I was spiraling. What I was actually doing was stepping out of the story they'd written for me. And once you do that, there's no going back. The disclosures were due in 10 business days. That was the law. Not a suggestion, not a courtesy, a requirement. I marked the date on my calendar and went back to my life, such as it was. Morning runs, job applications I didn't rush, dinners alone that no longer felt like punishment. I didn't remind them. People who are used to control don't take reminders well. On day 3, my father emailed. Subject: clarification needed. Hannah, we received a request from your attorney regarding company disclosures. This feels unnecessary and aggressive. We would prefer to resolve any misunderstandings as a family. I read it once and forwarded it to Claire. Her response came back within minutes. Do not engage. On day 5, my mother called. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said, skipping greetings. If you had concerns, you could have come to us. I did, I replied. For years. That's not fair, she snapped. We trusted you. You relied on me, I corrected. Trust would have included honesty. She went quiet, then tried a softer tone. You're embarrassing us, she said. People are asking questions. I imagined the warehouse, the lenders, the vendors who were now paying closer attention. That's not my doing, I said. That's how systems work when oversight returns. She hung up. On day 7, the first document arrived. Not from my parents, from the bank. Claire called me immediately. They've frozen one of the operating accounts, she said. Why? I asked. Because your parents missed a covenant, she replied. One you would have caught. I closed my eyes. The bank had noticed the disclosure request. Not because they cared about me, but because requests like that signaled risk. Risk made lenders nervous. Nervous lenders asked questions. On day 8, a vendor I barely knew called my cell. I don't want to get involved, he said quickly. But we're being asked to resubmit invoices with different dates. Don't, I said. I figured, he replied. Just thought you should know. By day 9, my father showed up at my apartment. He hadn't been there before. He stood in the hallway like a man who'd lost his map. You need to stop this, he said. No, I replied calmly. You don't understand what's at stake, he said. If the bank pulls support, they already did, I said. His face drained of color. You talked to them, he accused. No, I said. They talked to the numbers. He stepped closer. This business feeds this family. It fed on me, I replied. He stared at me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Emily can't handle this, he said. She's drowning. I know, I said. That's why you put her there. His mouth opened, closed. You're doing this out of spite, he said finally. I shook my head. I'm doing this because when I was inside the system, I protected you, I said. Now I'm outside it. On the 10th day, the disclosures arrived. Incomplete. Sloppy. Redacted in places they shouldn't have been. Claire smiled when she saw them. They're panicking, she said. And panicked people make traceable mistakes. She filed a motion that afternoon. A request for court-supervised accounting. The effect was immediate. The second bank froze credit access. A third demanded updated guarantees. Vendors shortened payment terms. Emily called me for the first time since everything began. Her voice cracked halfway through my name. I didn't know it was this bad, she said. I know, I replied. You could help, she said. You know how to fix this. I looked out my window at the quiet street below. I already did, I said. For years. Then why won't you now? She asked. Because helping without authority is how this happened, I replied. She started to cry. I'm scared, she said. So was I replied, when you took my job. The call ended without resolution. That night, Claire sent me one last message. Tomorrow, the court will order a forensic review. I sat on my couch, hands folded, heart steady. They thought removing me would make things easier. What it actually did was remove the last person willing to keep their secrets. The court order arrived on the Thursday morning, not by email, not by phone, by courier. A thick envelope addressed to Cole Event Supply, stamped, signed, and unmistakable. Court-supervised forensic accounting. Full access. No internal filters. No family discretion. Claire called me as soon as it was filed. "This is where the story stops being theirs," she said. "From here on out, it's just facts." I didn't celebrate. I cleaned my apartment, did laundry, cooked dinner. Because when consequences finally start moving, the loudest thing you can do is stay ordinary. By Friday afternoon, the first forensic accountant was on site. Her name was Denise Alvarez, mid-50s, calm, unimpressed. The kind of woman who didn't waste words on reassurance. She requested everything. Not just the ledgers my parents expected. Server access, archived emails, vendor communications, loan correspondence, expense reimbursements tied to personal accounts. My father called that evening. "They're asking questions that don't make sense," he said, agitation leaking through his careful tone. "This is invasive." "It's thorough," I replied. "You know this business," he said. "You could explain things." "That's exactly why I'm not," I said. He lowered his voice. "Emily is falling apart." I imagined my sister in the office I used to run. The ringing phones, the numbers she never learned to read, the pressure she'd inherited without the tools to survive it. "You gave her my job," I said. "You gave her my responsibilities. This is the part that comes with it." "You always did this," he snapped. "You always had to be right." I paused before answering. "No," I said. "I just stopped being useful." He hung up. By Monday, the cracks were visible to everyone. Payments flagged, receipts missing, personal expenses coded as operational, vendor rebates never recorded, cash withdrawals with no explanation. Nothing flashy. Just the kind of pattern that didn't look like one mistake. It looked like a habit. Emily called me again. This time from the warehouse office. I could hear voices in the background. Denise's, calm and firm. "They're asking about checks I didn't write," Emily whispered. "About things I don't know." "You shouldn't," I replied. "You weren't supposed to." "They think I did this," she said. "They think I approved it." "Did you sign anything?" I asked. She hesitated. "Yes," she whispered. "When?" "All the time," she said. "Dad said it was routine. That you used to do it." I closed my eyes. This was the moment my parents had been running from. "She used you," I said quietly. "No," Emily said quickly. "They did." It was the first time she'd said they instead of you. By Wednesday, the bank formally withdrew its primary line of credit. Operations slowed. Staff hours were cut. Vendors demanded cash up front. The company that had survived recessions, weather disasters, and supply chain collapses was being undone by its own accounting. My mother showed up at my apartment that night. She looked smaller, older. The composure she wore like armor had finally cracked. "You're destroying everything," she said. I didn't invite her in. "I didn't," I replied. I stepped away. She shook her head. "You knew this would happen." "Yes," I said. "Then how can you live with yourself?" she asked. I looked at her for a long moment. "Because for the first time," I said, "I'm not living with lies." Her mouth trembled. "You could stop this," she said. "You could tell them it was a misunderstanding." "No," I replied. "That would be another lie." She left without another word. On Friday, Denise Alvarez submitted her preliminary findings to the court. Claire read them aloud to me in her office. "There is sufficient evidence," she said, "to suggest prolonged misrepresentation of company finances and breach of fiduciary duty by the controlling officers." I sat back. "What happens now?" I asked. Claire folded the report. "Now," she said, "your parents realize that this isn't a family dispute anymore." I went home that evening and opened my laptop. There was an email waiting from the court. Notice of upcoming hearing. Attendance required for all controlling parties. I smiled once, not because I was winning, but because they were finally being forced to sit in a room where silence wouldn't protect them. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I arrived early, not because I was anxious, but because I didn't want to rush the moment. I wore a simple gray suit, nothing sharp, nothing soft. Neutral. like the truth tends to be when it's finally allowed into the room. Claire met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. "They'll try to speak for you," she said quietly. "Let them." The courtroom wasn't large. County level, fluorescent lights, hard benches. A place designed to strip drama down to facts. My parents were already there. My mother sat rigidly, hands clasped too tightly in her lap. My father leaned back, jaw set, projecting confidence that didn't quite land. Emily sat between them, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like she was waiting for permission to breathe. None of them looked at me. That was new. The judge entered, a woman in her early 60s, efficient, unimpressed by family dynamics. "We're here," she said, "to determine whether further oversight is required." She turned first to Denise Alvarez. Denise didn't soften anything. She spoke calmly, precisely, laying out patterns. Not accusations, patterns. Repeated behaviors, consistent misclassification of funds, lack of internal controls, personal benefit drawn from corporate accounts. The judge asked questions. Denise answered. My parents' attorney tried to interrupt. The judge shut him down. "Your turn will come," she said. When it did, my father stood. He spoke about legacy, about building something from nothing, about stress and mistakes, and how families sometimes blur lines when everyone is working too hard. It was practiced. Then the judge asked one question. Who was responsible for oversight during the period in question? My father hesitated. Primarily me, he said, with support from my wife. And Miss Cole? The judge asked, nodding toward Emily. She assisted, he said. In good faith. The judge nodded. Then she turned to Claire. Miss Donnelly, she said. Does your client wish to speak? I stood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at my family. I ran operations for 6 years, I said. During that time, there were no missed payments, no vendor disputes, no covenant violations. When I was removed, I lost access to information, but not responsibility for the outcomes. The judge watched me closely. I signed a document under misrepresentation, I continued. I didn't contest it emotionally. I contested it procedurally. I sat down. That was all. The room felt heavier afterward. Not tense, settled. The judge took a recess. When she returned, her ruling was brief. Court-appointed management oversight. Temporary removal of my parents from financial control. Continued forensic review. Personal liability under consideration. My mother's breath hitched audibly. Emily stared straight ahead. My father said nothing. Outside the courtroom, the hallway buzzed with low voices. My parents' attorney pulled them aside immediately. Emily lingered. Hannah, she said softly. I turned. They're blaming me, she said. They're saying I signed things I shouldn't have. You did, I said gently. Her face crumpled. I didn't know, she said. That doesn't change what happened, I replied. She nodded, tears slipping free. I'm sorry, she said. It wasn't an apology for taking my job. It was an apology for finally understanding it. That afternoon, my phone lit up with messages. Extended family, old clients, people who had heard something had happened, but not what. I didn't respond, because this wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about closure. That night, Claire called. They're preparing a settlement proposal, she said. I looked out my window at the dark street below. Of course they are, I said. This will end the company as they know it, she continued. They want to preserve something. I nodded. So do I said. She paused. What? Myself. The proposal arrived 48 hours later. Not by email, not casually. By courier again. Thick envelope. Legal weight. Claire called me before I opened it. They're offering peace, she said. On their terms. I didn't rush. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, let the envelope sit unopened, like a test I wasn't afraid to fail anymore. When I finally broke the seal, the language was familiar. Careful, polished, built to sound reasonable. They wanted to end the forensic review. They wanted to avoid personal liability. They wanted to keep the company alive in some form. In exchange, they offered me a payout, a generous one, on paper, a lump sum for my contributions, a severance framed as gratitude, a clause stating I would have no future involvement, no claims, no public statements. Silence, purchased cleanly. Claire watched my face as I read. This is what they think you want, she said. They think I'm tired, I replied. She nodded. They think money ends this. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought about the warehouse. The people who would lose jobs if things collapsed entirely. The vendors who depended on contracts. The drivers. The seasonal staff. And then I thought about myself. About how many times I'd been asked to absorb damage so others wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. What happens if I say no? I asked. Claire leaned forward. The review continues. Personal liability becomes real. The company likely doesn't survive in its current form. And if I say yes, they control the ending. I looked down at the settlement again. There was one line I couldn't stop rereading. No admission of wrongdoing by any party. That was the lie they still needed preserved. I want changes, I said. Claire raised an eyebrow. What kind? Structural, I replied. Not emotional. I dictated my counter-proposal slowly. Independent management installed permanently. Parents barred from operational control. Emily removed from any executive role, with severance and transition support. Full repayment of improperly classified funds. And one more thing. My name restored in the company's official history as operations director during the years in question. Not for ego. For record. Claire listened without interrupting. They won't like this, she said. I know, I replied. They don't have to. The response came the next day. My father called. Hannah, he said, voice tight. This is unnecessary. No, I said. This is accurate. You're dismantling what we built, he said. I'm correcting what you hid behind, I replied. You're punishing us, my mother's voice cut in from the background. I closed my eyes. I'm removing myself from a system that required me to be invisible, I said. What happens after that isn't punishment. It's consequence. They rejected the counterproposal. Of course they did. The forensic review resumed. 2 weeks later, Denise uncovered something even my parents hadn't anticipated. Personal guarantees tied to corporate debt, signed years ago. My parents had been using the company to shield personal exposure. The moment oversight arrived, the shield cracked. The bank demanded renegotiation. My parents didn't have the liquidity. The company entered restructuring. Employees were informed. Some left. Others stayed. An interim management team stepped in. Emily resigned quietly. She sent me a message. I don't know who I am without them telling me. I didn't reply, because that was her work now, not mine. The final settlement came a month later. Different tone, different posture. They accepted every term. Claire reviewed it, line by line. It's solid, she said. They're out. For good. I signed, without ceremony. Not because I'd won, because the fight was over. That night, I walked through my apartment and realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I wasn't relieved. I was empty in a way that felt clean. The family business would survive. Smaller, quieter, honest for the first time in years. My parents would adjust. Or they wouldn't. Emily would figure herself out. Or she wouldn't. None of that was mine to manage anymore. I had done the one thing I'd never been allowed to do before. I had chosen myself without asking permission. The invitation didn't come. That was how I knew the decision had already been made without me. Every year, Thanksgiving at my parents' house followed the same pattern. Group email in early November. Assigned dishes. Passive reminders. My mother's way of proving the family was still intact, no matter what fractures lived underneath. This year, November passed quietly. No email, no text, no accidental mention. I found out the same way I'd found out about my removal from the company and my sister's promotion, through someone else. A former employee I'd stayed in touch with messaged me a photo of a long dining table, already set. Turkey in the center, candles lit. My parents at one end, Emily seated close to my mother, head tilted in the familiar posture of dependence. The caption read, "Grateful we can finally breathe again." I stared at it for a long time, not because I wanted to be there, because I understood what it meant. I wasn't being punished. I was being erased. I spent Thanksgiving alone, by choice and not by accident. I cooked a simple meal, ate slowly, took a long walk after dark while houses glowed warm behind curtains I no longer needed to be behind. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt intentional. 2 days later, my Aunt Carol called. "Hannah," she said carefully, "your mother is having a hard time." I waited. "She feels like you've turned your back on the family." "I stepped out of a role," I replied, "not away from people." "That's not how she sees it," Carol said. "I know," I replied. Carol sighed. There's talk of Christmas, whether you'll come. I almost smiled. Tell her I won't, I said. There was a pause. Are you sure? Yes, I didn't explain. Explanation had never changed anything before. December came fast. The company finalized restructuring. New leadership announced. Quiet press release. My name listed correctly in the historical timeline. Operations stabilized. Claire called one afternoon. You're officially disengaged, she said. No residual obligations, no future claims. Good, I said. What will you do now? She asked. I looked around my apartment, at the life that had shrunk and clarified at the same time. I don't know yet, I said. That's the point. The unexpected call came 3 days before Christmas, from my father. I almost didn't answer. Hannah, he said, voice subdued. Your mother wants to see you. I said nothing. She's struggling, he continued. She doesn't understand how things got here. She helped bring us here, I replied calmly. She needs closure, he said. I closed my eyes. She wants absolution, I corrected. Closure comes after accountability. Silence. You don't have to come home, he said finally. But maybe we could talk. Just us. I considered it. Not emotionally, strategically. What would change if we did? I asked. He didn't answer. That was enough. No, I said. I'm not reopening doors I finally closed. He exhaled. You've changed. Yes, I said. That was the goal. He hung up without saying goodbye. On Christmas morning, I woke early and watched snow fall through my living room window. No obligations, no performance, just space. That afternoon, I booked a one-way flight. Not far, just far enough. I didn't tell anyone, because the version of me who announced her plans was gone. The version of me who moved quietly was the one who survived. As I packed that night, I realized something that settled deep and steady. Being excluded wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Being included at the cost of yourself was. I left on a Tuesday. No farewell dinners, no dramatic exit. Just a suitcase, my laptop, and a lease agreement waiting in my inbox. The city I chose wasn't exotic. It wasn't symbolic. It was practical, mid-sized, quiet. 2 hours from where I'd spent most of my life, but far enough that running into anyone from my old world would require intention. I wanted distance, not exile. The first week felt unreal. I woke up without a schedule that revolved around anyone else's needs. I walked unfamiliar streets, bought groceries no one would comment on, sat in cafes where no one knew my family name or the business it was once attached to. For the first time, I wasn't Hannah Cole, the dependable daughter. I was just Hannah. I started consulting within a month. Not for family businesses, never again. For companies that needed systems rebuilt after quiet disasters, governance failures, leadership transitions. The kind of mess that doesn't make headlines, but bleeds slowly if left unattended. I was good at it. Better than I'd ever been before. Because now, I didn't confuse loyalty with silence. The call came 3 weeks after I moved. Emily. I stared at the number until it stopped ringing. Then I blocked it, not out of anger, out of clarity. My mother tried next. Then my father. Then an email from an address I didn't recognize, sent on my birthday. We don't know how to talk to you anymore. We miss you. I deleted it. Missing someone doesn't entitle you to them. The real consequence arrived in spring, not as a confrontation, as a realization. A former vendor reached out to me privately. We met for coffee halfway between our cities. He looked uncomfortable. I shouldn't say this, he began. But people are talking. About what? I asked. About the company, he said. About your parents. I waited. They think you forced them out, that you engineered the collapse. I smiled slightly. And some think you were right, he said. But no one wants to say it out loud. That didn't surprise me. Most people don't admire boundaries. They fear them. The company survived. Barely. Smaller contracts. Less credit. No room for nostalgia. My parents stayed on as symbolic advisors for a few months before quietly stepping away. Emily moved out of their house. She took a job in another state. Entry level. No family safety net. I heard she struggled. I also heard she stopped blaming everyone else. Both things could be true. One evening, as I was reviewing a contract at my new desk, I realized something that made me stop typing. No one had asked me to fix anything in months. Not a crisis, not a mistake, not a life. The urge to step in had faded. That was the real win. I'd built a life where my absence didn't create chaos. Because I'd finally stepped out of systems that depended on my self-erasure. I poured a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the city settle into evening. Somewhere behind me, my old family was adjusting to a version of reality where I wasn't absorbing the impact. And for the first time, they had to feel it themselves. The envelope was forwarded 3 times before it reached me. My old address, then my parents' house, then finally, weeks later, to the apartment I'd already started thinking of as permanent. No return address, just my name, written carefully, as if handwriting alone could soften what words never had. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the counter while I made dinner, while I ate, while the day ended without anyone else's expectations pressing against it. When I finally slid a finger under the seal, I already knew who it was from: my mother. The letter was 3 pages long. That surprised me. She wasn't someone who used many words, unless she was directing them. She wrote about confusion, about not recognizing how things had gotten so far, about how families sometimes make mistakes when they're trying to protect each other. She wrote about my grandmother, about legacy, about how none of this had been meant to push me away. She didn't apologize, not once. Instead, she wrote, "I hope someday you can understand why we did what we did." I folded the pages carefully and placed them back in the envelope. Understanding had never been the problem. The problem was that understanding had always been demanded of me, while accountability had been optional for them. That night, I didn't call her. I didn't write back. I opened my laptop and finished a proposal for a new client instead. 2 days later, Claire called. "There's been a development," she said. "With the company?" I asked. "With your parents," she replied. She explained calmly, the way lawyers do when emotions aren't part of the equation. The restructuring had revealed additional personal guarantees tied to older loans, ones that hadn't been fully disclosed, ones that now, without the company's former cash flow, were becoming unmanageable. "They're selling the house," Claire said. I closed my eyes, not in triumph, in recognition. That house had been the anchor of everything, the symbol of stability, the proof that their way of doing things worked. Now it was being quietly dismantled. "I'm not involved," I said. "No," Claire agreed. "You aren't." That mattered more than I expected. A week later, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. Margaret, my grandmother's old friend. We crossed paths at a small bookstore near my new place. She looked surprised, then relieved. "I wondered where you'd gone," she said. "Somewhere quieter," I replied. She studied my face. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel accurate," I replied. She smiled at that. Before we parted, she touched my arm. "Your grandmother would have been proud," she said. "Not because you fought, because you stopped carrying what wasn't yours." That stayed with me. The final contact came the following month. An email from Emily. It was short. "I'm starting therapy. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now." I read it once. Then I archived it. Some acknowledgments don't require response to be real. That evening, I stood on my balcony and watched the sun dip behind buildings that had never known my name. For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like something I needed to manage for others. It felt like something I could choose. The last thing I let go of wasn't money or a title or a business that no longer belonged to me. It was the belief that being needed was the same as being loved. That realization didn't arrive with drama. It came on an ordinary morning, months after everything had settled, while I was standing in line at a coffee shop near my apartment. A woman in front of me dropped her wallet. I picked it up, handed it back, and she thanked me without expecting anything more. No obligation followed. I carried that feeling with me the rest of the day. My life now is smaller in ways that matter, and larger in ways that don't need explanation. I consult 3 days a week. I say no without rehearsing it in my head. I rest without justifying it. I've learned that calm isn't laziness, and distance isn't cruelty. I haven't spoken to my parents in over a year, not out of spite, because silence is sometimes the clearest boundary. I hear fragments through people who don't realize they're delivering news. My mother volunteers now, quietly. My father consults part-time. The company still exists, but it no longer revolves around control disguised as care. Emily sends a message once every few months. Neutral updates. No demands, no expectations. We are no longer orbiting the same center. And that's healthy. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, if I miss the version of family I lost. I tell them the truth. I miss the idea of it. But I don't miss being the one who made it work while being told I was replaceable. Here's the lesson I learned, and it cost me almost everything before it gave me my life back. If your love is only valued when it's useful, it isn't love. If your silence is required to keep peace, that peace isn't real. And if choosing yourself feels like betrayal to the people who benefit from your sacrifice, that's not a flaw in you. That's the system reacting to your exit. I didn't get revenge by watching anyone fall. I got it by stepping out of a role designed to exhaust me. That's the kind of karma that doesn't need witnesses. If this story resonated with you, especially if you've ever been the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who held everything together while being taken for granted, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, about boundaries, self-respect, and choosing your own life without apology, make sure to like and subscribe. Take care of yourself. You don't owe anyone the version of you that disappeared so everyone else could stay comfortable.